Well, let's see. Only one person is outside the United States so far, so let's see if we can fix that. But we'll start right here near us. Brandon in Round Rock, how you doing?
Hey, peace be upon you. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well.
That's good. Well, first I just want to emphasize that it's okay for us to agree. I know that being on that show, most people would have an opposing viewpoint, and so the nature is to argue against it, because otherwise you would feel like you're wrong or you would have criticism of the people next to you. So the points that I'll make will be very simple, and I hope that you'll simply agree with them if you agree.
Okay.
So first question is the composition, and we all know what the word composition means. I'm talking about the material shape. Is the composition of an airplane wing logical? I mean, doesn't that seem obvious?
Well, so I'm not completely sure what you mean by is it logical. I mean, here's the thing is, when it comes to the design of an airplane wing, both with regard to the materials and the design, they're constantly changing as we learn more about what's better, more efficient with respect to aerodynamics. So I would say it's logical in the sense that we have used reason and our understanding of this to build something that functions.
Exactly. An aerodynamic wing is logical because it would be illogical to make it square, because then it wouldn't perform the function of flight, and that's the entire reason for the wing, right?
Yes, if your intent is to create something that flies outside, within an atmosphere, you don't want a board cube and you don't want a big square.
So if you found a wing, obviously a wing can't fly on its own, but let's say an entire airplane, no matter what it is, and you realize that it performed the function of flight because it was aerodynamic, you used reasoning, and therefore you concluded that it was logical, then, wouldn't that be... okay, so what criteria would you use to determine if it's logical? If you found a wing and you could test its function like flight or a plane, how would you... What do
you mean if I found a wing? What do you mean if I found a wing? Because what it kind of sounds like is, like I stumble across something that is wing-like. How did I determine that it's a wing and that it was designed and intended for this and not something that, because there are plenty of river rocks that seem to be incredibly aerodynamic, and I don't find it particularly unlikely that you could find one in a shape that we would identify as wing-like.
Right, because a rock doesn't fly like a wing consistency. It wouldn't produce lift unless it were in the shape of, aerodynamic.
Well, sure, but the fact that something does this doesn't mean that this is what it was designed for. I mean, you can find you've got boomerangs that are made out of wood and, they're crafted, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't find a stick that had been shapen to be fairly aerodynamic and would fly pretty well.
And I think also, what has to be taken into account too is if you're taking something like, an airplane wing, right? Well, I think that probably what came first in that process, was a study of, the principles of aerodynamics. And then, based upon your understanding of aerodynamics, you would design the wing to conform to what this told you the shape of a wing or the makeup of the wing would need to either look like, et cetera, in order to fly, to give the craft lift, what have you. So, I mean, the study and the understanding of aerodynamics would have to come first before the wing came along,
Right, I agree.
So in a sense, it's only logical in that the wing is the conclusion, right, derived from study, right? I mean, the shape of the wing, the makeup of the wing, all of that. That is what comes at the end of not only study but experimentation, trial and error, what have you. So in that sense, it would be a logical process for people attempting to design an aircraft, a flying machine.
So let's consider two things. One is how effective it is. A wing is very effective at producing lift. You could say, well, yeah, a stick can fly too, but it's not very effective at flying. It couldn't fly consistently. It wouldn't fly if you threw it. Couldn't fly on its own, right?
Neither can a wing.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, with the entire airplane, what I'm saying is, if you put an engine on a stick, it wouldn't fly because it doesn't produce lift. It would have to be a specific logical shape to actually fly. I mean, you could throw it for a second, but I guess you could say long distances. But either way.
I understand, Brandon. I mean, you're basically saying that we have designed wings that are efficient at this task of flying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. So let's consider multiple functions. So you have flight. You have the consumption of fuel in order to, fuel the engine. And then let's consider one other function. You have the landing gear. So if any part of that were illogical, it would not perform that specific function, like the wheels. They have to be round, otherwise.
I think so. I'm a little flummoxed by your use of illogical.
Right.
What we're really talking about here is whether or not something is good at something. Yes, these are logical conclusions. It's probably a better idea to make the wheels round rather than triangular.
Right, because otherwise they would perform no function. If they were triangular, they wouldn't roll.
Well, they wouldn't roll very well.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think part of the problem here is that I'm anticipating where you're going, and I will let you meander there.
Yeah, so the point I'm making is we can consider a wing, we can consider a wheel, we can tell that it performs a function because we can roll the wheel, or if we see the entire plane, we can tell that it flies. So we can look at the composition and say, well, we study with science, and we say, well, it's aerodynamic, it's shaped a specific way, and it flies very well because of that. Obviously, very well is subjective, but the point is we can tell that it performs that specific function due to the composition, right? So therefore, we can conclude, well, this composition is logical because if it were illogical, it just wouldn't perform that function, or it would do it horribly, and it would be a stretch of the imagination to say that.
The problem is that this entire discussion is question begging on whether or not this is its intended function, because I can design this coffee cup. It's horrible at flying.
Right.
So it's designed for something else. Then we recognize design by contrasting it with things which are naturally occurring. And so, when I find this coffee cup, we have no evidence that this coffee cup is going to just naturally occur. We don't know any mechanism for it. All the evidence points to the fact that it was designed. When we go and we investigate it to the best of our abilities, we find out this was designed, and we find the same thing for aircraft wings and wheels and stuff like that. But you can't just go to the function and how good something is at a function and thereby, and because of that, conclude design. Because, when you talked about round wheels, well, there are plenty of round rocks that roll incredibly well. Some are spherical ones even, or, as good as, we need them to be. But that doesn't mean that those things were designed. And so when we talk about the difference between something like an airplane wing and something like, my arm, one of those, all of the evidence points towards design, and none of the evidence points towards it occurring naturally, or at least that's the current assessment. If there's evidence of wings forming naturally, I'd need to see it. And in the case of my arm, all of the evidence points towards this being something that occurs naturally, and there is no evidence that this is designed with some function, as if there was intent. We are the product of natural selection.
Okay. So I agree about the rock, and we can also consider multiple functions. The plane, it can land, it can consume fuel, it can fly.
Okay.
So we consider all of the functions, and we consider the entire composition. A rock by itself, yeah, it can roll, but there's no other, doesn't do anything else.
Okay.
That's part of it. But let's go back to contrasting it. So if you found a metal wing and a bird wing in nature, what criteria do you use to determine? Obviously, we already know the plane wing is designed, but if you're using your criteria by contrasting it,
yep.
What are you comparing about? How do you tell which one is designed and which one isn't?
So there are certain hallmarks of design. For example, the metal wing that you talked about is going to be made of materials that don't occur naturally. It's going to be formed in a way that doesn't occur naturally. At least we have no evidence for it. And there is a trail of known facts about the invention and process of manipulating metals and studying aerodynamics and constructing aircrafts. And when it comes to the bird wing, well, everything about that demonstrates something which occurs naturally. And nothing about that demonstrates something that was designed.
So what you're saying is that you don't actually have to compare it to something that occurs naturally because you already know it's designed.
No. You don't begin by already knowing anything.
Exactly. Right. So if you found a metal wing, metal occurs naturally, and so does a wing, a bird wing. If you found them laying there, you would have to consider their composition and their function to determine which one was designed.
You would have to consider that you would have to consider the composition.
Right.
I don't necessarily. You don't get to presume the function. Okay, you don't get to say this is a wing because it looks like a wing or because it'd be particularly good at at being a wing.
Okay.
You recognize design by contrasting it with that which. Otherwise, if you're not recognizing design by contrast with that which naturally occurs, then you're in the position where everything is now designed.
Right, exactly. I understand that, and I agree with that.
Okay,
So when you're
so
comparing
is everything designed?
Well, yes.
Okay, how did you reach that conclusion?
Well, we're getting to that, but I'm not done with the argument. So if you're comparing the composition, what are you considering about the composition to determine which one is designed?
Whether or
If-
not
if-
it's
if
occurring
not the
naturally.
function.
Yeah,
What-
you can't
Metal
discount
does
the
occur
fact
naturally.
you can't discount the fact that we live in a technological society where, for example, we already have foreknowledge of the fact that there are such things as aircraft and vehicles and buildings and things that are man-made to perform certain functions or to do specific tasks. And so we do have an understanding, or that people make stuff. So when and quite often we are inspired to make stuff by that which we find in nature. It was the desire to fly, like birds do, that that led people over years and years and decades, to attempt some sort of man-made flight. So there's.
But he's asked a specific question, and he said
We're going in
metal.
circles, and I
Hang
don't-
hang on, Brandon. I'm going to answer your question because you said metal occurs naturally. Yes, metals do, but composite metals that bear the hallmarks of tool marks and design and have a blueprints on record in places, that doesn't occur naturally.
Alloys don't occur naturally.
Right. So we're going in circles. That's what I said earlier. If you already know the wing is
No,
designed, then you don't
I
have to
didn't
use
say
your
I already
criteria.
know the wing. I said after investigating the wing and its properties and
Its properties,
assessing
right.
and assessing it with the information that we can verify about it, all of the available evidence points to the conclusion that composite metals do not occur naturally in nature in the manner in which they would show up in a wing.
Yeah, but this is all kind of it. The scenario that you're asking us to engage in just isn't realistic, right? I mean, for example, we don't have to stumble upon artifacts in nature in order to conclude these things, right? I mean, we already live. If we want to see an airplane, we go to an airport, right? I mean, which is where they keep airplanes. Mm-hmm. And so so this whole idea of imagine that you are just this blissfully ignorant person who is wandering through the wilderness, and you happen to see this and you happen to see that. It's a thought experiment, but the thing about thought experiments is they don't really map to reality very much. I mean, we need to kind of talk a little bit more realistically about how we know these kinds of things. And we don't know things by stumbling upon them in nature and sort of brute force drawing conclusions based upon just thinking about, well, here's a shape and there's a shape and this shape looks like this other shape. That isn't really how we do that. Isn't really how we kind of understand things. So.
Well, because I'm asking you what criteria we can use to determine deliberate design, and what you're saying
I've already
is that,
told you.
Yeah.
No, what you're saying
No.
is that we can compare it, but you are saying that anything biological is therefore not designed because that is quote-unquote naturally occurring, whereas anything metal is designed if we have knowledge of it.
No.
Okay.
I have not said that anything biological is not designed. What I've said is the evidence for things that are biological demonstrates that they are naturally occurring. There's no evidence for a designer for things that are naturally occurring. That doesn't mean that we know everything about them, and it doesn't mean that there wasn't a designer. What it means is that there isn't evidence for a designer merely because you've stumbled across something that you find to be efficient or complicated. None of those are the hallmarks of design. Efficiency and complicated, those aren't hallmarks of design.
I agree,
And
that's
your
not my
position is that everything is designed.
Right. But I'll
And
get
so
to that.
I'm asking you how you determined that.
That's what I'm getting to, and that's what I'm explaining to you.
Well, I've asked
So-
twice, so.
Well, we can't get to the point. So you agree that if something is a biological material, then it could be still designed. Or are you
No,
saying
that's
that
not what
everything-
I agreed with. Let me
Well,
explain.
you're
Let me
contradicting yourself.
shut up, Brandon. Let me explain this simple logical thing to you. The fact that I have not said it's not the product of design does not mean that I am conceding that it could be. I have no idea if it could be or not. You have to demonstrate that there's something out there that could do this before you can say that it's possible. The fact that I'm acknowledging that something's not been demonstrated to be impossible does not mean that I am agreeing that it is possible.
Okay. So if you found something that looked like a wing. We won't even say it's a wing. Just,
Brandon, how about we stop finding stuff and get to your point?
Yeah.
because we need a criteria to determine design.
I've
You
already
can
given
compare
you the
something
I've already
natural.
given
Yeah,
you the
well-
criteria 3 times at least.
No, if you find something that is made out of a biological material that is in the shape of a wing, how do you determine if it's designed? What do you compare it to?
How do you? That's
you're
the
the one-
question.
yeah, you're the one who-
I've already answered this several times now.
Right. I investigate it. I look at the composition. I determine if it has a function by testing it. If I find
How do you know that function, that there is a function and this was intended? Because there's a
Because
difference. You don't just get to assume intent.
right, because we can see consistency. If we see more
Consistency?
than one,
Why is
if you-
consistency relevant?
Yeah. A
Because
consistency
then
in
that's
what?
the obvious function. If you see more than one airplane, they're all shaped the same way. They all can land. The wheels are round. We know with science that
River
a
rocks
round
have a
wheel-
consistency, and they produce ripples and they're really efficient at producing ripples in small creeks. Does that mean that they were intentionally designed with the intent of producing ripples in creeks?
Well, rocks could have a function, but that's too simplistic to demonstrate the argument. They could have a function. Maybe their function is to.
But you've
figure
already
out
said
who
that
knows
you
what their
think
function is.
everything is designed, which
And I
means
do.
by extension that you think rocks have a function. So
Yes.
so what do you think that function is?
I don't know what that is, but we can use a wing. as
So
an
then
example.
why are
I'm
you
not
so
using
sure
a
they're
rock as an
designed?
example.
Why are you so sure everything is designed?
Yeah,
You can't. You're jumping to conclusions about things before you have enough data to make those conclusions.
Not only
Because I don't-
have you talked about the function, but you've assumed intent from function. Where's your evidence that things can't function without some intent? But now you're saying in the case of rocks that they could have a function, which you have already presumed is an intended function, even though you don't know what it is. So where's the logical in that?
Yeah. See, this
We're
kind of
not
gets
talking
back to
about
the.
rocks.
This
We're
gets
talking
back.
about wings as an
I'm
example.
talking about rocks.
This gets back to the last
Why?
time we talked about this, Brandon, which is just what is your criterion to distinguish design from non-design? And if you think everything is designed, even if you say you believe everything is designed, in order to make that statement as an intelligible statement, you at least need to have in your head a concept of what non-design would be like. So what I would like to know from you is, what is your concept of what a non-designed object in nature would be? What is your concept of a non-designed universe? How would a non-designed universe look? And based upon that, how can you then conclude that the universe isn't non-designed? What is it?
know.
What's a non-designed universe look like?
I know. I can answer your questions if you let me explain. I
Well-
have reasons for what you're saying. So the point is, you claim, unless I'm wrong, prove me if I'm wrong, you claim that nothing is designed deliberately in nature.
No.
Is that right or wrong?
No. What I'm asking you is what your criterion is.
Okay, and I'll get to
I'm
that.
just-
And by the
I'm
way, you're
tabling-
wrong. You're wrong. And I just frickin' explained this to you not 2 minutes ago. I'm not claiming that things in nature are not designed. I'm claiming that there is not evidence for design. That's not the same thing.
Right. Okay, so you're open to the idea that nature may be designed deliberately, and what is the criteria that I would use, right?
I am open to anything provided someone defines it and
Right.
explains it and then provides evidence for it.
Okay, so let me finish without interrupting me. You find
I tell you
multiple-
what, you get snarky
see,
like
you
that
know,
again
you
and I
can-
will interrupt your ass permanently. But go ahead
you know,
and continue.
even though you're rude and you tell me to shut up, I still let you speak. So
You know
if
what?
find
You don't have a
multiple
choice,
birds-
Brandon. You don't have a choice about whether or not you let me speak on my show. You got that?
I know you rage quit on me last time and hung up, but maybe this will be beneficial for the viewers, even if you don't,
But Brandon,
Hang on,
answer
hang
the
on,
question.
hang
What
on.
is your criterion? How do you distinguish
Let him
design
answer.
from non-design?
Let him answer.
What's a non-designed
Let him
universe
answer.
look like?
If you find multiple birds, you see consistency. So therefore, you can determine a function. You see them flying. You consider the wing. The wing is made out of feathers. It is shaped aerodynamic just like airplane wings, because we know from science that is a logical shape for the airplane wing. Its muscles perform the function. If they were not shaped that way, if they're not composed that way, then it would not perform that function. Same thing with the feet. Same thing with the digestive system. It consumes fuel. We can conclude that it is logically composed. The only way to compose something logically is if you are aware, if you have awareness. The engineers could not use logic to build an aerodynamic wing or research it if they were deaf, dumb, and blind, if they couldn't
Brandon?
think.
Brandon, you're wrong. What you're engaged in is special pleading because you want to look at a bird and say that a bird is so good at its particular function that it must have been designed. But here's the thing. If those materials of that bird had formed together to be a cat, it would no longer be good at the function of flying. It would be good at the function of sitting in your lap and meowing. And if those materials had been formed into the poop, then it would be no longer good at sitting in your lap and meowing. It would just sit there and make a mess. You cannot look at something and conclude that it was in fact designed for the function that it does. Because what you're saying is, look at this bird. It's a collection of materials. It's a collection of atoms. It is a pattern. And it does what it does perfectly, or it does what it does incredibly well. Well, that is true for everything. A rock does what it does well. A cat does what it does well. I do what I do well. And if you did what you did well, we wouldn't be talking about the same thing over and over and over again. What you're engaged in is a tautology. X is good at what it does. It's
No,
not.
it's not.
Yet, okay.
No, it's not topology.
You are beginning by looking at what it does, concluding that it is efficient. You know what? If there's a bird that was terrible at flying, you could conclude that it was intentionally designed to be terrible at flying, correct?
No.
What?
You're not considering the rest
What?
of the functions.
Hang on,
If you were gonna-
hang on,
Okay, go
Brandon.
ahead.
I'm trying to listen. Could you not conclude that a bird that was terrible at flying was designed to be terrible at flying?
You could.
Okay.
Or a flightless bird.
And aren't there flightless birds and birds that are terrible at flying?
Yeah, I brought that up last time. There are flightless birds that have wings on them that, by all accounts, look to be aerodynamic wings, or wings that ought to provide the function of flight. But these wings, these birds can't fly, so why do they even have wings?
So were those birds
Well-
not designed?
Ignorance of the function does not negate deliberate design, and they also have many other functions.
It's not
They
the goal
digest
to.
food,
It's
they
not
communicate.
It's not an obligation to negate deliberate design. Answer the damn question. Were those birds designed too?
Yes, they were, because they have
And-
many other functions that we can use the same criteria. They have feet that walk, digestive systems.
Sure,
they have
but their wings
muscles.
don't work. Why do
Yes.
they have wings that don't work?
Who knows? We don't fully understand ourselves.
Aha, there,
How should we know? We
okay.
didn't design them.
So let's say that here's a bird with wings that function and it's incredibly efficient at it, and here's a bird with wings that don't function and it's not efficient at flying, but you're going to find something else to say that it's good at. Here is a relative of the bird that no longer has its wings at all. It's just got feathers, so it's useless at this. Here's a bird that has actually lost its legs, so now you don't have any drumsticks. Here's a bird that is dead. Now,
Okay.
you're going to look at all of those and say that they're designed because they're all good at doing what they all do, right?
Yes, because they have other
Yes,
functions.
and
we
that
can
is
use the same
that is
criteria.
not, Brandon. Why do you not realize that by claiming that everything is designed because everything is good at being what it is, that you have engaged in nothing but one big fat freaking tautology that does not demonstrate design, it merely asserts design.
Because you are ignoring my previous statement. Just because a penguin wing looks like a wing does not mean it does not have another function, because we're ignorant of it.
It doesn't matter if it has another
another
function. Did you not listen to the question I just asked you?
Yes, let me finish. If a
No,
caveman found a forge-
Yeah.
no. I asked you a question and you're avoiding it.
All right, what is it?
Here are all of these things,
Mhm.
and you are saying that they are all designed because they are all good at being what they are. Is
Because they have-
there anything that is not good at being what it is? That's the first.
Everything has a function. It does something. But
Okay.
just because we can't determine the function does not mean it's not designed.
Correct.
For instance-
I have not disagreed with that at all.
Okay.
And
Right.
you keep going back to this ridiculous negation. It is not a matter of demonstrating that it's not designed. It is a responsibility. The burden of proof is on those who are claiming that it is designed. And if your mechanism for identifying design is to merely say that everything is designed, and your justification for this is that everything is good at being what it is, then you have not provided a mechanism at all. You have provided
know.
a bald assertion that tells us nothing.
Yeah, you're just
know,
defining
I
you're
know.
defining
Just let me-
design into existence as an element of the thing you're discussing.
I got a bunch of other callers. You got
Yeah.
3 minutes. Go.
I know what you're saying. What I'm saying is, just because one thing may not appear to be designed or we can't determine it, does not mean that there are many other things in nature that we can determine what was designed. And if we found one thing that was designed, like a digestive system or the claw of a pistol shrimp, then we can therefore determine that nature is designed.
How
Yes,
would you
I said
determine that
everything
they're
is
designed when you've already just said they're all designed? How did you determine they're designed?
Well, because I don't have to know that even though I claim that everything is designed, we don't have to know that everything is, because you believe that nothing, okay, maybe you don't, but most people assert that nothing in nature is designed.
No, most
We can
people don't
determine
assert
a
that. Why don't you
bird
quit pulling
or a wing-
statistics out of your ass and answer the question? How did you determine that they're designed?
Because we see multiple birds with consistent wings. We know an airplane wing is dynamic, therefore we can conclude that a bird wing, because
So
it's
you're working
I
Working
see
back
multiple
to the
piles.
airplane
I
that's
see
flight
multiple
because it has
piles of
light
poop,
feathers.
and they all look the same. Does that mean the poop was designed?
No, poop doesn't do anything. I'm talking
Fine,
about a
goodbye.
bird wing.
There's your
All right, there,
contradiction.
yeah, that's it.
Poop doesn't do anything. Have you never looked into fertilizer, young man?
Yes.
Poop doesn't do anything. Poop is miraculous. We take stuff in, we process what we need out, and we excrete this waste product, which is yucky to us, but it has millions of uses. You need to look into whether or not poop is designed,
Yeah, I tell you.
and it will be just as obvious as what you just said.
Yes, and some religion somewhere has a god of poop.